Welcome to Hearthstone Hypotheticals. For today's episode, we're going to be talking about the most useless cards in the game, and hopefully we'll be able to get some pretty funny and some pretty true replies with this one, because there's not really that many, 100% useless cards in the game, so this one's not going to be as long as some of the other episodes. But let's go ahead and see what some of the most useless cards in Hearthstone are, according to my Twitter. So the first reply that we have is coming from Lazy Peon. He's saying that I agree with a lot of the cards already posted, like Glacial Mysteries. It's probably going to be one of the most useless ones that we see ever. But I got two more that I think that will fit the bill. Alarmabot used to be decent, but it's far too easy to kill, and most good minions are battle cries anyway. And Pit Lord, because there are other demons that will cost less. So for those of you who have not played Hearthstone at the beginning of its conception, Alarmabot was actually a playable card, believe it or not. Octobot would actually go into some, I think, not necessarily Wallet Warrior decks, but decks very similar to Wallet Warrior, where they had, a lot of really big minions that they just wanted to kind of cheat out. And back in the day, dealing 3 damage was not necessarily, not uncommon to do, but a lot of decks just really didn't have access to a lot of damage back then. So I think, classes like Rogue could easily take care of this with cards like Backstab and Eviscerate. But if you're, say, a Warlock and you have to deal with this on turn 3, I don't really think that they had a lot of tools to be able to actually deal with this. So Alarmabot actually had some capabilities, but nowadays he's just way too useless because 3 damage is just way too common nowadays for every single class to have access to. So you're never getting value out of Alarmabot unless you somehow give it stealth, and even then, that is not even good enough. But Pit Lord has really had no applications whatsoever. I think I may have seen this card once in a very early version of a Zoo. But the big issue with this card is that a 4-mana 5/6 just isn't that big of a payoff. Vanilla stats really don't get anywhere in Hearthstone unless they have some sort of really awesome ability to go with it. So just minion stats by itself is never really going to be good unless you're a 4-mana 7/7. But Pit Lord just dealing 5 damage to the face, it's just really useless and doesn't really help with what Warlock wants to do with hitting itself because it's too much damage and the payoff is not good enough. Britt McCall, somebody who usually comments on these videos, so shout out to Britt for always being a loyal fan, but he is saying that this guy literally has Rush and it was way worse. Before Rush was even a thing, nonetheless. Leroy has half the mana and half the damage it can go face, so why not make Icehowl? So the interesting thing about this card is that I've actually heard some people talk about this card in conjunction with Charged Devilsaur, which is pretty much the same thing, except Charged Devilsaur always can have charge, very similar to how Icehowl has it, but Icehowl can't hit heroes. So effectively, this charge is always going to be Rush, but if this card had Rush, then that means that it could actually hit the face. So I think we've actually seen a 9-mana 10/10 with Rush in the Druid class. I think it's Frizzy Elemental. I think that's a 9-mana 10/10 with Rush. And you can kind of compare this card to that card, and Frizzy Elemental really doesn't even see play in a class like Druid that can ramp mana. So that just really says how bad Icehowl is as a card. The only thing I can really say to defend this card is it's very similar to Abyssal Enforcer maybe, or Supreme Abyssal, whatever the 8-mana 12/12 demon is that can't hit face as well. This card is very similar to that, except you can actually trade with this card, but I mean, it's only really good in Arena, let's be honest. There's no deck that actually wanted to use Icehowl and play it effectively. The only other thing I can think of is maybe a Silas combo, but why would you want to go through that? That just doesn't make any sense to me. But again, with the Charge of Devilsaur bit, Charge of Devilsaur can hit face and you can combo with it. Very, very cool card, but if you were to do that with Icehowl, being able to throw this card out from your hand and it could hit heroes, that is that is definitely a lot. So if this card could hit heroes, it would definitely make it more playable. But unfortunately for Icehowl, if it did hit heroes, it still wouldn't even really be that good if you want my honest opinion. I would be able to meme with it, but not a lot of people would pick up this card. So the useless stat is very high right now. Lo-Fi Lord is talking about Warglavies of Azzinoth. For me, it's all of the attack again, but only minion cards. I 100% think they are useless to me, at least. I'm kind of confused by this explanation with Warglavies of Azzinoth, but I can actually definitely get why this is on the list, because this card has not seen play since Demon Hunter got some, first off, better tools. Second off, this card got nerfed. So the first nerf to this card was, it was originally made a 6-mana 3/4. Which definitely curbed its playability a little bit. But then after the Demon Hunter set got reworked and Hearthstone got changed entirely, they pretty much made this card into a 5-mana 3/3 in order to hopefully make it see some play again. The biggest issue, though, is that, again, like I said earlier, Demon Hunter has better cards now. The Warblades that give you that give you lifesteal is just definitely better. The card that makes you draw Death Rattle minions is pretty decent. Let me see, what's another Demon Hunter weapon? Oh, yeah, the Corrupt Elemental is another card that you would play, and that's a 4/3, so that's automatically better than the Warglavies of Azzinoth. You just have to corrupt it first, which really isn't that difficult as a Demon Hunter. But this card just kind of fell off. It's kind of hilarious how this card literally used to carry Demon Hunter because it would just completely destroy the aggression on the other side, and then suddenly, since you have your big minions, your opponent is just going to start dying very quickly, and that was kind of the power of Demon Hunter back in the day, was not just how consistently it could deal damage at high amounts, it was also the fact that you could just deny your opponent with cards like AoE and Warglavies of Azzinoth. So I don't think this card is going to see play anytime soon, unless a Demon Hunter gets some, like, I don't know, like Wind Fury on a weapon, and if you're really going to do that, that's going to break the class. So Warglavies of Azzinoth is just kind of being outshined by all the other weapons in Demon Hunter, and unfortunately 5 mana is also kind of a expensive card for Demon Hunter nowadays, so maybe this card might see play, but I'm not really hopeful for it. Michael here actually had a pretty funny reply with whatever cards are currently in my hand, and you know what, as a memer, I can definitely relate to that, because unfortunately for me, every single time I play some kind of combo or some sort of weird interaction, I always get the cards that I don't need in my hand to start, while I'm just never getting what I need. So Michael definitely is taking the meta approach to that. I'm not 100% sure how to say this name, but Varent Hala is saying that, has this card ever seen any use in any context? Glacial Mysteries. It is bad in constructed, bad in arena, bad in randomly generated decks, and there aren't many janky combos that can use it. I can't even think of a Tavern Brawl where I could use this. So let's be honest, Glacial Mysteries is not a card that was made in order to make Mage good. I am fairly confident the only reason why this card was ever made was to try and make cards like a Primordial Glyph and other randomly generated cards much more worse. Because unfortunately for Hearthstone, you need a bad card pool in order to make a generation a balanced mechanic. So I'm fairly confident that they just put this overload terrible card in a deck, so that way there's just no way that you can ever get the value out of it, and it's just effectively a dead card if you happen to find it randomly. I've only seen one person ever play this card legitimately and actually win a game, and that was Mark McKay, because he was doing a deck building challenge. So literally the one person that actually managed to use this card was only using this card in order to highlight just how terrible it is, and if it was actually possible to physically win a game with this card. So is this one of the most useless cards in Hearthstone's history? Let me know in the comments below, because so far I am willing to believe that this is the most useless card. It doesn't have any applications in any deck. It's literally just in the game in order to make Mage Discover worse, and there's only one player I've ever seen legitimately put this in their deck, and it was in there just to prove a point. So Glacial Mysteries might actually be one of the most useless, terrible cards in all of Hearthstone. Even though I did just say that Glacial Mysteries is one of the most useless cards of all time, Tall Miz is talking about Dinomancy, and honestly, that's a pretty useless Hunter card. Dinomancy, 2 mana, give your hero, your hero power becomes give a beast +2/+2. You have to spend 2 mana, and for what? A worse hero power. Steady Shot deals 2 damage to the enemy hero, and it is better 100% of the time. The other thing that kind of sucks about Dinomancy is that if you play this card in like a solo adventure, or in this particular example I'm going to use, if you were to do the Forged in the Barren secret interaction with Hunter, and you do this weird thing with lock and load, to where every single time you play a spell, you get a random spell generated to you. It's a really weird interaction. I'll try to like highlight something here to show you guys exactly what I'm talking about. But Dinomancy as a card literally stops that, because you need the hero power in order to reset the game board in that particular situation in the Forged in the Barren secret levels and stuff like that. But Dinomancy just has such disenergy. Like, why would you want to give a beast +2/+2? This hero power not only requires you to invest 2 mana to play this card, you have to invest another 2 mana into a beast you already have on the field. So unless that beast has charge, like, you already need to have something on the field, or if every beast has rush, it's the same principle. But Jesus Christ, dude, like, this card, I think, was another example of like Glacial Mysteries, to where if Hunter could somehow randomly find things, and Hunter doesn't really have a lot of Discover, so that's not 100%, the best thing here. But case in point, Hearthstone used to make a lot of really bad cards to find, so that way with cards like Lock and Load, for example, actually, it's a perfect example. it just makes the pools that much worse. So, unfortunately, I would like to see some of these cards see a little bit of, like, playability. Like, if you're going to make a card like Dinomancy, I don't know, make it to where, like, you just give all your beasts +2/+2. Okay, that's a little bit too good. That's a little bit too good. But you get my point. I want this card to at least have one way of being played. And unfortunately for me, I can't even think of one deck that actually wants to use Dinomancy over and over again. Maybe there's, like, some kind of weird combo with a Beardo, but then you have to keep investing, like, mana into your hero power. Like, there's just no way to make this card funny, good, or just remotely playable. Vander Lasers is saying any card in Hunter and Wild. Like, honestly, that's very, very true. Sadly, every single Hunter card in Wild just feels like a fair card, and Wild is not supposed to be a fair format whatsoever. Like, even the aggressive Hunter decks just don't even have, like, that much gas right now, so it's kind of interesting that Hunter is the quote-unquote fairest class, and it's still one of my least favorite classes because I don't like the play style of it, but at least with this next Hunter card, it makes a little bit more sense on how it can be, like, perceived as good, but then sadly it's just not good enough. But El Tinho is talking about how I crafted this on the first day of Ungoro and tried like hell in order to make this card work. It was amazing when it did, but it very often wasn't. It is a tempo loss that conflicts with the purpose of playing a lot of 1-drops. I think it lacked a bit of support to keep you ahead. So with cards like the Marsh Queen, I don't think that it's necessarily that these cards are badly designed, but for a deck that wants to play only 1-cost cards, you need your turn 1. Like, you literally need your turn 1 in order to maintain your initiative and to maintain your game plan with what you want to accomplish with your deck. But unfortunately, the Marsh Queen is a great example of, hey, I get to play this on turn 1 and get to trigger my quest. You know what I'm doing, and then suddenly for the rest of the game, I'm playing behind as a Hunter. Hunters literally want to take that very first turn to just attack. Deal damage, get on the board, do something interactive. If you literally sacrifice your turn 1 as a Hunter in an aggro matchup, there's a lot of situations to where you are just going to die because you don't have the speed. And then when you eventually play 7 1-cost cards, so let's see, turn 2 you can play 2, turn 3 you can play 3. So on turn 4, I don't even know if you have enough cards to make this possible, but let's just say for hypothetical reasons, you're able to play all the 1-drops on turn 4. That means on turn 5, you finally get your 8/8, and then you get the 15 cards added to your deck, which give you, 15 1-mana minions that are 3/2s that draw a card as their battle cry. So, like, you've done all of that. Best case scenario, you play the 8/8 on turn 5, but then what? Like, you've literally only just set up threats. You have not interacted with your opponent, you have not killed them, you have not dealt any damage to them, you are just trying to get on the board, and then suddenly you have all of these 3/2s, which will draw you a card, which is pretty cool, but it's just not feasible. Hunter doesn't win with this unless you're playing cards like Tundra Rhino, and in order for that to happen, like, I feel like you have to play the quest, like, last or something. Like, I'm actually, like, starting to brainstorm something as I'm talking about this card with, like, a Tundra Rhino combo. I don't even really know how to make this possible, but if you could somehow make your opponent have a Generous Mummy on their side of the field or something like that, you might be able to make that work. But regardless, the overall point is this card looks cool, looks amazing, and is a very misleading card. I should say misleading because it's just one of those cards where it seems more powerful than it actually is. But even in the best case scenario, there's just no way that you can initiate. This is just one of those cards that you just cannot actually kill your opponent with. You're just doing something cool. And unfortunately for Hunter, doing cool things, unless it summons King Crushes, it's not really winning you the game. Zeldig is talking about Kiri, the Chosen of Elune. Unfortunately, it's not the Chosen of Hearthstone right now. Imagine playing a 4-mana 2/2 to get 2 spells that you can have 2 copies of for 2 mana already and play them like without having to spend a 4-mana 2/2. Yeah, like, this is just one of those cards that, unfortunately, like, why do we want to play this card when Solar Eclipse and Lunar Eclipse are already played in better decks? So, like, case in point, Lunar Eclipse and Solar Eclipse are in Token Druid. It's in Spell Druid, a deck that definitely thrives on being able not only to have a deck full of spells, but also Solar Eclipse and Lunar Eclipse synergize perfectly with it, because you have one card that deals 3 damage and makes your cards, I think 2 or 3 less mana than they previously were, and then Solar Eclipse, which lets you play 2 cards, essentially plays the same spell twice. But yeah, like, this card just, if Solar Eclipse and Lunar Eclipse weren't already in the game, maybe it would be a reason to play this card. But since they are in the game, this card just becomes a little bit worse. I would kind of like to see this as like a 3-mana 2/2, but even then, I don't even know how well it's going to curb its win rate because it's a 3-mana 2/2. A 4-mana 2/2 is already really hard to make use of, and they're probably just thinking that Druid can cheat mana a lot, so that might be the reason why this card is at such a high mana cost. But Solar Eclipse and Lunar Eclipse are not worth 4 mana, like in terms of like getting them in your hand automatically. I would just rather play them in a deck and just, you know, play cards like Fungal Fortunes and just find them naturally. So unfortunately for Kiri, I don't know how this card is going to get played unless you maybe buff this card to like 3 mana or something. And even then, like, what's even really the point? What Druid deck do you want to be able to add additional copies of Solar Eclipse and Lunar Eclipse outside of like maybe a Spell Druid deck? And you really don't even want that many minions for it. The only minion you play is Gibberling, which literally synergizes with the deck insanely because of all the spells you have. So Kiri of the Chosen of Elune, like I said earlier, not the chosen card for Hearthstone. I don't think this card will ever see play unless Druid has some real reason to just play like only minions or something. But then you have to rely on your other minions to give you spells, so it's like, I don't know, dude. The more I think about it, the more useless this card seems to me. Zapper is talking about the Worgen Greaser, or Gazlowe. So Worgen Greaser, I believe, was a 5-mana 6/3, which was, oof, that was a terrible card. And Gazlowe, unfortunately, was, I think, either a 5-mana or a 6-mana 3/6. Whenever you play a 1-cost spell, you get a random mech, I think was exactly the card. I'll have them on the screen so you guys can see exactly what we're talking about. But Worgen Greaser and Gazlowe, I think Gazlowe had one deck that he saw play in back in Goblins versus Gnomes. I think he was in Mech Mage for a little bit, but it wasn't even like the best version of Mech Mage. So unfortunately for those two cards, they just didn't see a lot of play for the right reasons. Weebomb is talking about Purify because the simple thought of priests being able to purify anything and not themselves is absolutely absurd. And then if you want to talk about how good Purify actually is as a card, as silencing your own card and making you draw, it's not that good. Let's be honest. Silence Priest had like one kind of playable deck at it for a time, and it barely won. Like, it was like the Unicorn Priest, but it just wasn't even that good. So Purify, this is definitely a hilarious joke Weebomb, so you got me to laugh for sure. But Purify is actually a pretty useless card. So not only do you get the point of being funny, but you get the point and also being legit as well. iMic is actually putting a lot of different examples here. There are so many of them, it's insane. Harbinger Celestia, Temporus, oh god, Hir'eek the Bat, and Duskfallen Aviana. So let's start with the first one. The reason why this card is bad is because your opponent can literally dictate what the minion is. So if you're playing up against a hunter that has 1/1s, this will always be a 1/1. So unfortunately for Harbinger Celestia, unless you're going up against like a spell deck or something that literally will not play a minion against you, then maybe you can get your 4-mana 5/6. But it's like, the other situation where this card was supposed to be good was like against like control decks or something like that. But this card was literally printed when lackeys were a card. So almost every single playable deck had a lackey in it to some capability or another. So this card would just literally become a 4-mana 1/1. Like, how are you supposed to make this card good? I think that this card should have been in a different set. But unfortunately, this might just fit the theme of legendaries can't always be game breaking. Temporus, another good example. I don't know how Priest is supposed to be able to combo with this card because the biggest issue here is that for 7 mana, you are playing Time Warp for your opponent. I don't even have to explain it any way, any other different way. Like, literally, 7 mana, you're giving your opponent Time Warp, and how are they not going to kill you in 2 turns? Like, you are a Priest. You are literally sitting there waiting for your opponent to do something along the lines of killing you, and you're going to give them 2 turns to easily complete that. And then what are you going to do as a Priest to kill them in 2 turns where you can't already do that in 1 turn? So, like, that's the biggest takeaway from Temporus here. Is like, it's a sweet card. I would love to be able to win somehow with this. But Priest doesn't have any immune cards. Doesn't have any, like, stealth cards or anything like that. So Temporus has no way of being supported in an archetype like Priest. So 7 mana, play Time Warp for your opponent. That's going to be the meme for that card. Hir'eek the Bat. Okay, Hir'eek the Bat is a cool card. Cool card, but is kind of useless. I've like maybe played this card in like 1 or 2 decks, and those 2 decks were kind of gimmicky. There was one hand buff Warlock deck that I had where it was the oh god, I think it was the Loa. It was the high, like the Loa of the Bat or whatever. I forget exactly what the effect is, but it's essentially a stealth minion where every single time a minion dies, you get a +1/+1 in your hand. So if you could somehow do like a weird combo with like Defile and some other cards that like resurrect like 1/1s, you can get a pretty big Hir'eek the Bat that way. There's also the combination of Deck of Chaos, where it will literally swap the 8 mana and the 1 attack, so that way you have a board full of 1 mana 8/1s, which is pretty freaking cool, if you want my honest opinion. I've never been able to really pull that off, but one of these days I hopefully will. But other than that, there's really no way to make Hir'eek the Bat good, because they were trying to give hand buff capabilities to Warlock very, very slightly, and then they just slapped on this legendary and for some reason gave it a beast tag. I don't know why Warlock has all these really terrible beasts, but unfortunately for Hir'eek, he just needs a little bit more support before maybe he can start seeing some play. But then you have cards like Priest. You literally have Priest cards, so unfortunately for Hir'eek, it's just not going to be that good. And then the last card, Duskfallen Aviana. This is another good example of like, why would I ever play this? Martian Boo is actually defending this card a little bit, saying that Duskfallen Aviana is actually more useful than a lot of the other bad cards because it combos with Maiev. It's just a lot less good than Aviana, a Celestial alignment, but a worse version of a good thing is still better than a truly bad card like Sergeant Sally or Boogie Monster. So those are also two other legendaries that are ridiculously like bad. Sergeant Sally, I don't think has any way of being utilized because it's a 3 mana 1/1 that deals AoE damage based off the attack of the minion. So it's essentially a 3 mana 1/1 deal 1 damage to all your enemy minions when it dies. So that's pretty bad. And Boogie Monster, oh god, if I remember this correctly, it's a 7 mana 6/7 that gains +2/+2 whenever it kills something. That is also really, really bad. So, but the other thing I have to point out here with Martian Boo's tweet here is that it combos well with Maiev. So you're telling me in order for me to make this 5 mana card good, I have to play a 4 mana card that almost sees no play in Wild as well? Yeah, this is a pretty useless card. Like, Martian Boo does have a point saying that there are technically worse cards than Duskfallen Aviana, but let's be honest, if you're a Druid player, you definitely don't want this hot garbage in your deck. This next suggestion is going to be something you guys are going to have to hide from Swaguar, but Ocelot is saying hack the system. No comment, just a card. I've only seen 2 players rep this card before. Well, I've played it before myself, but I don't even remember the deck that I used it in. It was probably Brian Kibler's deck. But yeah, I've seen Brian Kibler mess with this card and Swaguar more recently because he's got like some kind of like weird Dead Man's Hand warrior that I don't even remember exactly what the Oh wait. Okay, I just remembered now. Okay, so remember that Crush the Turtle, how it gives you a weapon? The reason why Swaguar put this in the deck is because you're trying to make a deck where you're playing infinite turtles, so therefore you essentially have infinite weapons. So if you attack 5 times with your hero, you can always summon a 4/4 to try and kill your opponent a little bit faster. Is it good? Definitely not, but it's definitely a powerful meme for someone like Swaguar. But aside from the meme application, there was only one other player, Brian Kibler, that was able to play this card and actually do fairly well with it. And I think I made a YouTube video about this, about a year or 2 ago, back when this card was, back when it was relevant. But here's the thing about Hack the System. Like, it's just, remember what I was talking about the Marsh Queen and how you essentially have to give up your tempo and then you have to try and make something else work. And it seems cool, but all you're doing is just waiting for your opponent to hit you in the face. It's kind of what this card feels like. Like, you literally have to, turn 1, play this card. Turn 2, play like a Fiery War Axe or some kind of weapon. Attack with it immediately. And, like, you're not even going to trigger this card until, like, turn 6. So it's like, for a 4/4 or whatever the hell pops out of the reward, because, like, yeah, you get a hero power where you can, like, summon a minion over and over again. That's decent, but unfortunately the payoff is just not good enough because Hack the System, it really doesn't do anything for you until you get the reward, and the reward is really not that good, to be honest. Like, the more I think about this card, the more I'm like, they really wanted Control Warrior to have some kind of alternate win con with, like, infinite minions, but Warrior's not Diraxis, so let's not try to give Warrior a bad Diraxis card, because that's essentially what this is. Like, you literally get to swing with your weapon a ton of times and then summon a worse minion. So, it's just a worse Diraxis to me. Dabs is obviously going to take another shot at Illucia, and, well, although it may not be one of the most useless cards in Hearthstone's history, it is just one of the cards to where it just makes me feel like I'm useless while playing against it. So I'm going to give Bobby Dabs the credit he deserves there, because he's always just putting Illucia on my posts. G Money is talking about Tickatus, though, being one of the most useless cards in Hearthstone, and I can only see this in one context. There's a hot topic right now in Wild talking about whether or not you should play Tickatus or not, and that's just because Reno Warlock isn't really the best version of Warlock at the moment. It's definitely powerful, but I mean, Darkglare Warlock being a thing kind of makes this more difficult, and that's kind of like where this conversation is coming from, is that Tickatus does not do well against Darkglare Warlock because you have to play a 7-mana card, and I don't even know about all the 7-mana cards that are available in Warlock and in Wild right now that they actually want to play. So this is just a pretty interesting conversation. I'm pretty sure why this was included in the post, because it is useless cards. Like, Tickatus... Oh, wait, okay, hold on a minute. G-Money actually could be going for Tickatus by himself, because you never play this card as, you know, it's intended with, like, literally removing 5 cards from your own deck. You always play the corrupted version. So if he's going for that, that's actually a big brain thing that I literally had to talk to myself about to find out. But the other case I was talking about in Reno Lock does kind of still ring true for those people that play Reno Lock at the higher levels. But yeah, when was the last time you actually saw the first form of Tickatus actually be played? Removing the top 5 cards from your deck. Maybe there's a Nero deck that did this. Other than that, I really can't think of an example, because milling your own cards as Warlock is not something that you want to do. So, G-Money, you definitely big-brained me on this one, that is for sure. DJ Campbell is saying Moorabi was one of the worst cards ever made, because why would Free Shaman ever be good? 8 other people agreed with this, and honestly, I've only had one cool clip with Moorabi. I actually made a trolling clip with it before. And the way that it happened was I was actually playing Rogue. So here's exactly how this happened. It was the Ungoro meta. I was playing... I was either playing Odd Rogue or I was playing some sort of like Tempo Rogue, but essentially what ended up happening was I played a Swashbuckler and got Moorabi randomly. And I also played another Swashbuckler and got a Grumble. So essentially, the combo that I was able to set up is that I had Glacial Shard naturally in my deck. So what I ended up doing against my opponent, who was also playing Rogue, I believe, is I would play Moorabi into Glacial Shard. I would freeze one of their minions, which was in this case a oh god, I call it Combo Vine, but it's File Spine. It's the 5-mana combo minion where if you combo into it, it destroys a minion. I can't remember exactly what it is, but Vile Spine Slayer. There we go. I don't know why I can't think of names right off the top of my head. But yeah, I would use that, and I would bounce those cards back to my hand. So there was this really funny loop that I got going on where I just kept freezing my opponent's combo vine. I kept taking it over and over and over again, and I kept killing his minions, and it was this hilarious infinite loop I was able to generate. And then I was able to just buff the board and just win because I kept freezing his options, and he couldn't do anything against me. Other than that, Moorabi has seen like 0 play. Maybe Solemn or Ruffle has messed with this card a little bit. I don't even think Zeddy is that crazy to mess with this kind of card, because how can you make Free Shaman good outside of like Galakron, I guess? But another fun fact about this card, I may end up getting it tattooed on me. If you guys want to know the context of that, feel free to ask below in the comments, and I will gladly tell you guys how that's going to happen. But Moorabi is going to be at least on my skin at some point, so I don't want to call the card useless because I don't want to say I have a useless tattoo, but unfortunately for Moorabi, he's just kind of a bad card. There's really no defending it. ABC is saying Maxima Blastenheimer, which unfortunately is just a card that I feel like it was made for Death Rattle Hunter with Tonks and stuff like that, because the whole point of the card is that you bring the Tonk from your you bring the Tonk from your deck, it attacks, dies, and then triggers its, split 8 damage. That's a really cool combo. But Hunter just has a lot of cards that either do one thing very quickly, kind of similar to like Flark's Boomzooka and Maxima, or you literally have cards like Beast that just stick on the field and deal damage very, very quickly in the early game. It doesn't really seem like Hunter has a lot of ways of being designed where it's good at both lanes, because then it becomes very frustrating and they kill you very quickly. Unfortunately, Maxima is just not a card that gets a lot of value, because you literally need a big minion in your deck and you need to run a lot of minions. So what if you pull out something that doesn't even have that good of a death rattle? So unfortunately for Maxima, this is just not one of those cards that could see a lot of play, because there's just not a lot of synergies for big minions and Hunter of all classes. And then suddenly, if you're only playing big minions, you're not doing what Hunter can also do well with like little minions, little buffs, and just being able to charge a ton of damage all at once. So unfortunately for Maxima, it's just not that good of a card. But in addition to Maxima, ABC is giving us a whole list, so let's go ahead and just go through all of them. Baron Geddon, 7 mana, 7/7, deal 2 damage at the end of your turn to all enemies, actually to all characters. This card's not good because you don't want to deal damage to yourself, and unfortunately, Baron Geddon is just not as good as it used to be because it's not that he's not sticky, it's that minions can survive the 2 damage AoE. High Inquisitor, Whitemane. This is a card that is, I think, a 7 mana, 6/8 that revives all the minions that died this turn. This is a card that's really hard to make useful because first off, you have to play this card in your deck, and you have to have good cards that are worth bringing back. It's just not that decent. Low Walker Cho, unless you're WoW Hobbs, you're not really taking advantage of this card, or if you're chalky, doing some kind of weird chalky OTK with it. Baron Rivendare is just a card that is way too slow nowadays because, unfortunately, a 4 mana 1/7 is just way too weak. It's easy to trade into, and unless you're getting immediate value out of your Death Rattles, you're not really getting value out of Baron Rivendare. It's kind of sad that this card doesn't see a little bit of play in Standard, but it is what it is. Millhouse Mana Storm, we don't have to explain why this card is bad. It gives you card initiative. It gives your opponent initiative. 2 mana 4/4, pretty interesting though. Nat Pagle and Nat the Dark Fisher. We already know why Nat Pagle is pretty bad, but Nat the Dark Fisher was a 2 mana 2/4. Even though he could attack, he was still really, really bad because he could give your opponent a draw, which is not something that you want to do. It was 50% of the time that happened. Every now and again, this card would be used in like a mill deck or something like that, but it really didn't see that much play even with that. Floja, I don't know exactly how to pronounce this card. Lightbane, there were 2 Bane cards, a Lightbane and a Darkbane. The Darkbane was, if you put a spell on it, it would deal 3 damage. In this case, the Lightbane, if I remember correctly, gains Divine Shield, or something along the lines of, like, attack. I actually need to look this up real quick, because I cannot remember 100% what this card does. Haha, I was right. So I did look it up, and it's whenever you target this minion with a spell, you gain Divine Shield. So, bam. Pretty decent card there in that aspect, but, I mean, at the same time, gaining Divine Shield isn't really that impactful unless you're playing something like Librams, and even then, this card didn't even see play in Libram Paladin. Grifta, I've only seen like 1 or 2 people play this card before, and that would be Raffle and Mark McKay-Z. Usually this card is like a disruption tool, something for memes, but unfortunately, giving your opponent a card is just not that useful. Hemet Nessenwary, we've seen Hemet the Jungle Hunter, but unfortunately for Nessenwary, killing a beast is not good. It's funny how all the crabs saw play, but Hemet that kills a beast, which is essentially the beast crab if you think about it, it was just way too expensive, dude. Like, this card was, what, 5 mana or something like that? So why would you want to kill a beast for that amount of mana? At least the crabs were like 1 or 2 mana, so that way you could at least do something else with your turn, but Hemet was just not there. Madame Goria, bringing out a card from your deck. The only person I really saw messing with this was kind of Disguised Toast. And I think I've maybe seen Geminator play this card a little bit in Rogue. But unfortunately for Madame Goya, it's the same situation as Maxima, to where you have too many situations to where you have little minions in your deck, and just because you're trying to bring out a big minion doesn't mean you do this every single time. I think maybe Dane has messed with this card a little bit with his Death Rattle Rogue with big minions like Sneed, Sylvanas, and other really big Death Rattles, but again, this card just has too many dyssynergies with little minions in order to make it playable. Mayor Noggenfogger. This is a card I wish I saw a little bit more play, because it's a 9 mana 5/4 where all the targets are random. I would kind of wish that this card would affect your opponent's Discover as well, because you're technically targeting a card. I don't know if that's what it should be like, but unfortunately, Mayor Noggenfogger just doesn't do what he needs to do, because it's really easy to just kind of knock him out. Like, if you have like 3 minions on the field or something like that, then there are 5 total targets. And it's really easy in order to just hit that 20%, because this is Hearthstone. 20% is not really that unlikely. So Mayor Noggenfogger, I would love to see like a smaller version of him. Like maybe like a little bit cheaper or something like that. But I really feel like they made this card a 9 mana 5/4, not only to make Evolve necessarily worse, but also to try and make sure that this card didn't just drive people crazy. I would love to see another card like Noggenfogger, though, at either a cheaper card or a bigger version of it. Sagoth the Slitherer, unfortunately for him, 9 mana, 5/9 with taunt and can't be targeted by spells. It's just way too slow. It's just way too slow. There's really no other way to describe it. Like, You can't cheat this out of your deck. You can't really make copies of it. And 9 HP is not really that hard to kill nowadays. There's a lot of 8 mana taunts with this stat line, and they get kind of dealt with very easily or not played whatsoever. So Sagoth the Slitherer is a cool card, cool old god, but unfortunately is just way too slow. And then finally, the old Ysera. We're talking about the original Ysera, the 9 mana 4/12 that just gives you a dream card at the end of your turn. And unfortunately for Ysera, she's been kind of nerfed due to the dream cards being slightly less overpowered because of their mana changes or some of their functionality changes. But unfortunately for old Ysera, even with that, even before the nerfs, like, it wasn't really seeing a lot of play outside of like maybe Control Warrior or something like that. Like, you kind of hear, like, the question in my voice because this card really didn't see a lot of play throughout its history in Hearthstone. In the beginning, it definitely saw a lot of play because getting rid of a 12 HP minion was almost impossible a lot of the time. But unfortunately for old Ysera, it's just not meeting with the power level of other cards in today's meta. So I think that as Hearthstone gets older, old Ysera is just going to keep getting a little bit more decrepit, and unfortunately, it's just not going to see any play. And those are the most useless cards in Hearthstone's history, according to my Twitter. If there's a card that you guys feel like we definitely needed on this list, feel free to put it down in the comments below, and I would love to have a conversation with you guys about this. There's just a lot of really bad cards in Hearthstone's history, unfortunately, because back then they were really trying to make like random stuff like Evolve, random 5-drops, that kind of thing, and like random spells a little bit more of a toss-up rather than what we're seeing with today's meta with Priest and stuff like that. But unfortunately, a lot of these cards are just never going to see play ever again because they're just losing their power to the test of time. But what are some other cards that you guys feel like we didn't have on this list? Like I said, put them down in the comments below, and I'd love to have a conversation with you guys about this. We post questions every single day on our Twitter, so if you guys would like to see your own replies in one of these videos in the future, definitely feel free to check by the Twitter account and see what discussion we're talking about today. I believe the question that I posed today was, oh yeah, here we go. Okay, so this one's already got a lot of replies, but the most recent question that we have is, what is the best way to get better at Hearthstone? Wrong answers only. You'll see this video in about 3 days because I have 2 other posts that I have to make videos about. But that's something I love about this this kind of content, is that I always have a new video to work on. If you guys ever have a suggestion, feel free to say anything in the comments. I would love to have a conversation with you guys. I've said this 3 times now, but I really do enjoy talking with you guys about Hearthstone cards. Hope you guys enjoy this video on the most useless Hearthstone cards ever, and we'll see you for the next one.